And so I'm mainly talking to young people right now, teenagers, middle school, high school, young adults. Some of y'all young adults may have had him come onto your campus at some point in time. And I think this really needs to be addressed. And so young people, I know that you're used to watching short videos and clips and little things like that, but we can't have that right now. We need to be able to talk. We need to be able to listen. We need to be able to process, and process takes time. That's why it's called process, not instantaneous. Okay? All right. So, this 14 Revolution, and we're going to be talking about what just happened with Charlie Kirk, because something happened. I keep seeing people talk about how come you guys are like so upset about this, but you're not so upset about this other thing. And you have to understand, even in the bus, right, where the young lady was ended in the bus. It was a random thing. It shouldn't have happened, but this was a targeted attack at a specific person to shut them up. And so when you have that, it crosses into another territory. It crosses into something different. And so I'm mainly talking to young people right now, teenagers, middle school, high school, young adults. Some of y'all young adults may have had him come onto your campus at some point in time. And I think this really needs to be addressed. And so my goal is to talk to you because there's things that need to be done now that can't wait. It needs to happen now. Because if we don't, we will lose this moment, not of some kind of like revolution and something like, oh, let's just go. No. There is something in our hearts that needs to change. And so young people, I know that you're used to watching short videos and clips and little things like that, but we can't have that right now. We need to be able to talk. We need to be able to listen. We need to be able to process, and process takes time. That's why it's called process, not instantaneous. Okay? We need to be able to process. There was something that horrific that happened yesterday to someone who had an opinion. Some of them were political. Some of them were spiritual and moral. Okay? People can question, oh no, they were all, but the reality is there were certain issues that are biblical and obvious in the Bible, and some of them are gray areas. But the reality is, because someone didn't like what someone said, and we cannot have a nation. Here's the question. What are we doing? What are we united by if we don't have free speech? If we're afraid to speak out about what we believe because we're afraid that we are going to lose our lives, what do we have to agree on besides the fact that we can agree to disagree? Even Christians will agree to disagree. If we have a nation that can't agree to disagree, then we have a problem. And because you are the upcoming future of this generation, you have to have it in your heart that just because I disagree with somebody does not mean that they're not worth anything. This is huge. This is absolutely huge. I think we need to understand. Sorry, I'm trying not to blow y'all out with the audio. You have to realize that just because someone disagrees with you does not mean that they are not of value. This is what happens when your philosophy tells you that a person who disagrees is a monster. This is what happens when your philosophy tells you that we need to take God out of things. It's all about the government or science or this or that. When God gets removed, our humanity decreases. Part of what happened in the fall of man was that we were removed from God and we decreased in our humanity. And then what happens? As we remove God even farther from our lives, we decrease in our humanity, which means our ability for compassion, our ability for love, our ability for forgiveness. Paul said in the end times that the love of people will grow cold. This is what we see happen. How do you celebrate the death of someone? The assassination. How do you celebrate that? I don't care who you are. I don't care who you are. Again, I know this might be a little longer than you're used to, but what do we need to do right now? I want to give you 5 things that we actually need to do because I want to give you some action points. And the 5th one is probably the most important, so make sure you just stay in there. All right, I know you want to be short, but it can't always be short. When I saw what the MSNBC anchor said about maybe this is friendly fire.
Yeah, and again, I emphasize what you just emphasized. We don't know any of the full details of this. We don't know if this was a supporter shooting their gun off in celebration, or so we have no idea about this. But
he should be ashamed. And this isn't something I say lightly, because shame is not something that I want people to live with. But I think we've lost our ability to have shame. We've lost our ability to do something and to go, I feel ashamed. Why? Because being ashamed of what we have done allows us to recognize that it was wrong. God does not call us to walk in shame, but when we do something, the Bible actually says they have no shame. We must have shame. We must have the ability to feel ashamed when we do something. And that was shameful to say, oh, what was he doing? He was trying to say, oh, this isn't motivated by trying to silence someone who's on the other side. That's probably not what it was. It is what it was. And you need to call it for what it is. Here's some things I think we need to do right now. Number 1 was we need to grieve. No matter what side you're on, you need to grieve. I was reading an article or some reels by somebody, and it was just saying how we are not made to process things, or we see something horrific like this happen, and then all of a sudden we just begin to scroll to the next thing. You watch someone pass away, and it's weighty and it's heavy, and as a young person, you need to learn to sit in things that are weighty and heavy. It's a sign of maturity, because you can grasp the weightiness of life, and not everything has to be lighthearted, because not everything is. And then when you come around something that is heavy, you know how to sit in it, how to process it. You need to grieve. You're like, well, he wasn't even on my side. It doesn't matter. You need to grieve the loss of a life. You need to grieve the loss of freedom of speech. Why? Because when you silence a person, it means that the only thing that we can do now is be violent with each other, because we can't talk anymore. They ended the ability, something that God has given humans specially, to be able to communicate ideas, to be able to communicate with each other and find common ground, or even differing ground. We lost something in this nation because of this, and you need to be able to grieve about it. I think that we need to reconsider our positions. Does my position dehumanize the other side? If it does, then I need to reconsider. Does my position allow for different expressions and different thoughts, different ideas? I need to consider that on both sides. Because just because you belong to a political party does not mean your political party is always right. And we need to understand that. And if you're a follower of Jesus, you need to understand you're not a political party, you're a kingdom person. Am I a kingdom person before I'm a Republican? Am I a kingdom person before I'm a Democrat? Before I'm a liberal? Before I'm a conservative? Am I a kingdom person first? We need to understand this. We need to consider the philosophy and what the outcome is. I think we need to realize that there are some things that are worth living for and dying for. That's the next thing I think we need to realize. Charlie Kirk, I believe, really was trying to bring God to the public space in a new way for young people. And he was willing to die for it. And he was bold about it. We are just now beginning to feel in America what other countries have been feeling for a long time. The persecution of the church in a new way. But I want to say this. I think some of us, even you young people, you've been waiting for something worth dying for. Now, I'm not saying this is just give up your life. Oh, just go die. No. In Romans 12, it says to give your bodies as a living sacrifice to God. God called you to live for him, but he's worth dying for. I want to encourage you in this, that you not make God just a side thing, but he's your everything. I think the next thing that needs to happen is we need to realize that one of the markers of a true Christian is supernatural forgiveness. Our natural inclination is to lash out at the people, lash out at a side, lash out at an individual. But the reality is that it's not what God has called us to do, but he's called us to be supernaturally forgiving. Like Jesus was on the cross when he's hanging there looking at the people who put him there. And he says, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Why? Because they were being influenced by the demonic. We need to understand that when people don't know Jesus, that their ability to be influenced by the demonic increases. We need to ask God for supernatural forgiveness to love them like Jesus did, because it's the only way that we'll see change. Hatred won't do it. Lashing out won't do it. May we be reminded of the fierce love of Jesus. That the God who sent his son to the world, what kind of world? A messed up, horrible, chaotic, rebellious world. A world that was not for God, but against God. He sent his son to this same world that we are living in right now because he loved it. And may we have the fierce supernatural love of Jesus in us for the world, and even for people who disagree, especially for people who disagree. We don't wrestle against flesh and blood. They are not the enemy, even though that's what we see. We wrestle against the powers of darkness. But God has given us the Spirit. He's given us the light. He's made us salt. He's made us light. Are we shining? Or are we sitting back passively? We've sat back passively for too long. And speaking up isn't disrespecting people and treating them badly. Speaking up is speaking boldly and saying what needs to be said. And the truth will not always feel comfortable, but the truth is always right. Here's the last thing. I think Jesus said, go and make disciples of all nations. As you make disciples of all nations, we will see the world begin to shift. But because we have lost how to disciple, we have lost evangelism, we have lost sharing Jesus with our friends because, everybody has their own belief. But no, this is where it has led us. The church has taken its hands off, and the enemy has been given the ability to put his hands on. And it's time for us to be hands on again, loving the world, bringing Jesus to the world, bringing light to the world, bringing truth to the world boldly. And God has called you, young person. God has called you, college student, you, high schooler, you, middle schooler. God has called you to be the one to do it. So I'm challenging you. Not just to be like, I'm going to go and do something. No. But that you begin to love God even more. You begin to seek God even more. And as you love him and seek him even more, then he will show you how to bring light to people. Again, I know this was a little longer, but I hope you were able to stay with me. Because this is no accident. Something needs to happen. Something needs to change. And God wants you to be the change agent. This 4:18 revolution from Luke 4:18. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, and he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor, to set at liberty those who are captives, to set free those who are in bondage, to bind up the brokenhearted, to bring sight to the blind. That's what we're about. So love God passionately. Live your faith boldly.